The Russian cruise missile was an innovative design that revolutionized military tactics. It was tested first in 1948 and saw active service later. It slowly evolved, but these missiles' basic designs have remained unchanged. Over 2,000 models were created with various warheads for different purposes. Production continued until 1994, when it was discontinued due to substantial concerns about its accuracy and vulnerabilities to anti-aircraft weapons fire. In late 2010, the Russian military again revived interest in the design, developing new prototypes for use on modern aircraft. The new missile design would see the cruise missile carrying a nuclear warhead with an increased displacement. The first tests of the new weapon were completed in October 2012. A combination of international relations and the practical military needs of the Soviet Union drove the development of this missile. Following World War II, the United States, Britain, and Canada shared vast amounts of scientific data as part of their joint effort to defeat Germany. This included information on guided missiles and rockets. The Soviet Union used this data to create new weapons, but they were not always successful in their development efforts. They were particularly interested in guided missiles, because these were far more helpful than conventional explosives for attacking enemy assets that might be hidden behind terrain features, such as hills or buildings. These missiles were also more practical in opening up new avenues of attacks on enemy positions. The Soviet Union began developing guided missiles in the immediate post-war period and established a dedicated research institution for this effort. The scientists at this institution determined that many of the problems they encountered stemmed from the fact that conventional rockets were unstable when launched. To solve this problem, they decided to use a powered cruise missile that followed a less erratic flight path. It allowed it to remain hidden behind hills or other terrain features until it approached enemy territory. The Soviet military leaders felt this stealth approach was beneficial because the cruise missile had no inherent defensive capability against enemy anti-aircraft weapons. They also saw it as a helpful way of attacking enemy nuclear reactors, warfare's most valuable architectural features. The Soviets believed that once the Air Force was destroyed, conventional bombers and even fighter aircraft would be unable to destroy the nuclear weapons, unless they could somehow penetrate heavy enemy anti-air defenses. The original cruise missile design coupled a glider body with a rocket engine with an explosive warhead. This engine was ignited and then detached from the body of the missile as it continued on a gliding trajectory. When the missile reached enemy territory, it began to turn towards a target using little rockets inside hollow wings, which vectored the aircraft and allowed it to bank into turns. The revolution in guidance methods led to noticeable increases in accuracy and range. But physical modifications were also made over time to increase their lethality. The warheads became more powerful and increasingly sophisticated in the types of damage they could effect. The missile was initially designed to carry a single warhead. However, later modifications allowed the missile to transport multiple warheads. Some variants were explicitly designed to destroy American aircraft carriers, which were perceived as significant threats by the Soviet military. The introduction of multiple warheads also increased damage potential against other target types. For example, 2 warheads could be used against 2 targets, one very heavily armored area and a second less well-protected enemy location. It also made it more resistant to anti-missile countermeasures such as chaff. This is because each warhead had its guidance system and could be directed towards a different target from the others. The development of missiles continued over the next few decades. Russian missile strategy changed its focus to include a mix of surface-to-surface and surface-to-air missiles. The missile was further modified to include a turbojet in the engine. This modification was intended to make it more resistant to enemy anti-missile systems and better able to hit submarines beyond the range of the advanced S-200 anti-aircraft missile system. So let's look at Russia's missile strategy. But before that, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos in the future. The Soviet Union was the first nation to develop a doctrine of strategic offensive deterrence. Its theory divided the world into two areas. One region which was urbanized and heavily industrialized, and one that was underdeveloped or undeveloped. The Soviet Union had a strategic target to attack in the amorphous region, but they also wanted to ensure that this area remained undeveloped. They believed that if other nations developed the undeveloped site, it would be used as a base for military operations against them. The Soviets also believed that if this region was developed, it could eventually threaten the developed area and change the global balance of power. The Soviet Union's strategic deterrence theory also called for the offense to be the best defense. This meant that they would use offensive weapons to counter threats to them before any attacks had been made against them by other nations. This strategy aimed to provide a level of deterrence to the threat of attack, even when their own territory had not been attacked initially. The general principle behind this war-fighting doctrine is that inaction is a passive action that will not deter potential adversaries from attacking. The Soviets believed that once a potential adversary had been attacked, it was too late to prevent further attacks. They felt they had to be the first to attack to eliminate any potential threat. Soviet missile strategy was designed with this goal in mind. Wars of the future was seen as being global in scale, so the Soviet military felt that they had to have a global missile defense strategy. They also thought that this global offensive strategy needed to be coordinated with other members of the Warsaw Pact and the People's Republic of China, so that no nation would launch an offensive attack without support from others. The Soviet military believed that the coordination of their nuclear strategy with other nations would enable them to deter potential attackers and provide stability in the world. To be effective in its deterrence policy, the Soviet missile force had to inflict massive damage on potential enemies quickly and with a very high degree of accuracy. The Soviet Union also had to have a very high degree of survivability against an enemy counterattack. Its leadership feared that if it launched the first strike and it failed, it would have substantially weakened its second strike capability. This was a direct result of their belief in deterrence. They wanted to be able to deter by threatening the first use of nuclear weapons. However, the one instance where the Soviets did believe that they could launch a successful first strike was against the United States. So what is their strategy against the US? This strategy was based on the doctrine of launch forward, hit hard, and win quickly. The Soviets believed they could launch a massive attack against the US, possibly with nuclear and chemical weapons, to destroy American retaliatory capabilities. They also thought that they could hold American military forces at bay by launching a limited nuclear strike against military targets in Europe and then going on the offensive. They believed that if this strategy was successful, they would be able to bring about a war-winning campaign in as little as 3 weeks. Soviet missiles play a defensive role as well. The Soviet Union had an extensive system of missile defenses deployed against a US nuclear strike. They had a force structure that included various air defense systems, long-range ballistic missiles, and short-range missiles. They also had large numbers of interceptor aircraft and anti-aircraft guns in Europe, not to mention additional air defense systems along the periphery of their borders on land, at sea, and in the air. The Soviets believed these defensive weapons would protect against attacks from the US and its allies. The Soviets wanted to deny the enemy any opportunity to retaliate against a possible attack while they were trying to launch their attack. They also wanted to engage in offensive counterattacks against the enemy's retaliatory forces before they could engage in their counterattack, enabling them to inflict a disproportionate degree of damage on their opponent. The Soviets had even more weapons deployed in other locations than they did within its frontiers, including several aircraft carriers and submarines located outside its borders. The Strategic Defense Treaty with China gave them an additional defensive advantage should they need it. So, what do you think? Do you believe that Russia's strategy and cruise missiles pose a threat to the rest of the world? Let us know in the comments. And with that, it's time for us to call it a day. But we do hope that you liked the video and found it informative. Subscribe to our channel and don't forget to click the bell icon. Your valuable suggestions are very important to us, so do post them in the comments section. And I'll see you in the next video.